Okay, good. We're rolling. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. Time has come, and I will call this meeting of the Economic Development Committee to order. It's Tuesday, August 6, 2019. First on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our June 4th meeting of this year. Do I have a motion to approve?
I would approve the walk down memory lane.
Okay. If that's what it is, do I have a second? There, I have a second from Mr. Martins. Thank you. Any changes or concerns about the said minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 2, discussion on the sale of the properties at 401 and 415 South First Avenue, the erstwhile West Side Battery. Mr. Schock.
Sure. So this evening we welcome Urban Street Bistro to provide a kind of update, and Clint, you wanted to come up to the podium and address the committee on your continued efforts.
Yep, absolutely. We are still moving forward, and we are actually in an excellent position, I think, right now, to tentatively set a closing date. We are waiting on some revised estimates from the contractors, as the project has scaled back from the addition, so now it's more of a remodel than an overall rebuild process. So as such, we felt confident enough to be the general contractor for the project and sub out all the necessary work. So we've just trying to get a few more of those bids back in before we can, I guess, probably be more accurate in the proposal that we were looking for the commercial development loans. But as you know, summertime, getting a hold of your contractors is pretty difficult, as it's a seasonal work. Still said, very confident that I can have the majority of those over the next week. We've got a decent amount, but to make it a pretty legitimate proposal, we need a few more. Other than that, I mean, that's about it. Still trudging along. I know Chris had some other questions about the application we submitted. If there's anything I can answer on that, I'd be happy to.
Okay, well, obviously, we've got street work going on out there and a staging area in your side yard.
Right.
And all that. So any questions from the committee for Clint?
I think, we did, Clint, you feel confident, obviously, in setting the closing date, in the next couple months to ensure that it would comply with the 2019 taxes that you're paying for as part of the closing.
Correct.
Yes? Yep. And also then, so the commercial rehab application will table to next month, I think. By that time, hopefully, you'll have all your quotes that you need for review.
Correct. I know you looked for a different rendering on it. Basically, we're hearkening back to the original proposal. I think you should have a copy of that as well, but otherwise I'll resend it. It's the original proposal of the property, parking lot, and does not include the addition. So.
Okay, very good. Anything else from the committee?
I have a question about the loan process, but that's separate from this part, right?
I guess in theory, although we could answer it at the same time.
Okay. There were a constituent put a couple of questions to me that I couldn't answer, and there was skepticism, I guess, and some sharpshooting on Facebook regarding this whole process and how long it's taken. But one of the questions was whether the city in these commercial rehab loans, whether the city asks for 3 years of tax returns to prove capability to repay the loan. How does that process work?
I think, again, the commercial rehab loan is based on the improvements that are scheduled to be made at the property, because the city takes a second position on the property. And so it's primarily based on the improvements, the quotes that you've received, and the assumptions about what the new value of the property is going to be in the future. It's not a personal loan, it's not a business loan. We do make those loans as well through different pots of money, but the commercial rehab program is based on improvements to physical property.
So the tax returns are not required?
That's correct. Tax returns are not required for a commercial rehab loan application.
Okay, and do we require collateral, or how's that part work?
Again, it's secured against the property.
Okay.
As I was talking to Mr. Schock earlier today, it's sort of tantamount to an infrastructure improvement when you do something like this, because you're taking existing stock that might be challenged and it's getting improved, and be what may in the future, it'll be there in better condition than it was, when we started. So, Ms. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So our standing in the second position then versus the primary financier, typically commercial financing or bank loan, we then essentially hold the equivalent of a second mortgage, or is it less secure than that?
No, it's the second mortgage.
Okay. And so then the loan qualification and the financial qualification, actually, we're relying on the first position lender to pre-qualify that. And so then if the bank is willing to take that risk, then the gap you're picking up with this commercial rehab, is that?
That's somewhat correct. I guess, again, it's based on the physical improvements that are being made to the building. So,
Right.
our position is, we're not necessarily reviewing the business plan of the project, and we're not reviewing the, business worthiness of that necessary lender. We're reviewing the project based on the quotes and based on the projected improvements that they're making to the building. And this is something the city's had a long history of. We have done, $17 million worth of lending over the years. That's a total. I think there's been 25 or so commercial rehab projects, again, tied to the value of the property, and how much improvement they're going to be making to the property. Maybe Tammy wants to comment as well?
Well, I think that goes to the second part of my question, and I guess just for folks who are not clear on the difference between the two, I think we should talk a little bit about the difference between commercial rehab loans and tax increment financing. Because I think so often they're both administered by the city, but they're very different in their mission and their purpose and in what our expectations are. And I think we need to talk about that a little bit, because I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the commercial rehab fund is a revolving pool of funds that the city has held on to for decades, that it continues to collect through repayment and then reloan to new projects for exterior rehabs or whatever. A number of them are already visible in our city. And that's totally different than a tax increment loan or a reverse TID, which is our common financing mechanism. So I guess talk about that a little bit so that people understand the difference and, why the methods might be a little bit different.
Yeah, maybe Tammy wants to talk.
Can I talk about the commercial rehab part of it?
Yeah.
Yes, to answer your question, we work very closely with the first mortgage lender because
Could you
they're.
step up to the mic a little
Yep,
bit?
we'll try
A
to-
little bit?
Sure.
You don't have to get on.
I don't want to butt you out of
Trade
here,
out.
but yeah. So with the commercial rehab program, we do work with that first lender very closely because they're asking, what is the monthly payment going to be for that business owner? Because they want to make sure that they are going to be able to make that payment. So we calculate what that payment's going to be. We work with them very closely because their loan is not going to close knowing if as long as our loan closes, they're going to close and vice versa. TIF I can't talk about.
So, but there's a dynamic going on between the first lender and the city as essentially the second lender to make sure that the payments on both are affordable and
Correct.
sustainable?
Correct.
And that screening has taken place as part of the first lender's review?
Correct. And
Okay.
usually, the first lender is a lot of times the SBA loan, a small business
Sure.
association, so their vetting process is even more in-depth than, if you're lucky to get a, local lender.
Yep, and that's what I wanted us to talk about, because that mechanism being a little bit different than what we do to screen TID applicants, it needs to be understood, I think, because sometimes there's a misconception that we're using one in lieu of the other, and they're really two different animals.
Very good. Mr. Gisselman.
But this is being, the commercial rehab loan issue number
3 on
number 3 is being delayed until next month. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So then, moving back to the number 2, discussion on sale. So do we have the terms of that sale, or how?
Yeah, those have already been set. As you know from previous time, there's a set price in the proposal and the past 2 years of taxes, which have been.
Since that's been a while, can you speak to the?
I don't know the total off the top of my head. I believe that it was, it's like
246 and change.
46, yeah, I think that's right, 246, which includes a $225,000 offer, which was the original proposal accepted by the city, and then 2 years of taxes at the assessed rate. Previously assessed rate.
And so is it appropriate at this point in time to look at the business plan, or, because once we sell it, it's been a while in limbo, so to speak, and I'm just I'm just sensitive to the fact that once we do sell it, it's sort of out of the city's hands, and I question.
Well, it's not really out of our hands, other than the fact that of the position that we hold with regards to the loan.
But that's another issue coming up at another time.
Right.
There are contingencies within the sale that require the development of the property that have already been spelled out, if that's the concern.
That's a major concern. So, I mean, is there a timeline here, and separate from the commercial rehab loan, I understand, but, so that you're, at this point in time, ready to sign the document? I'm just overly concerned for the city that, that everything is going to be proceeding with the next 5 years.
Absolutely.
According to your plan.
Absolutely. We have no doubt whatsoever to get the property developed and up and running pretty much as soon as possible. If it's not, it becomes a bigger liability for us and, something that
Well,
could-
it also becomes an issue for the city.
Right. But you understand my perspective as well, like, if I get the property purchased and I can't get it developed quick enough, then, we lose money. So we need to, as soon as we get the property purchased now, we're ready to get the rehab under so we can start earning money.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. Obviously,
For now, yes.
we're behind where we'd like to be, but as we all kind of know with the delays with First Avenue, had we closed on the property when we originally wanted to, we would be sitting with a property that was mostly developed, unable to earn income for 4 or 6 months, and, financially, that's devastating.
I understand that.
Do you need a motion?
No, this is just a discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have just a quick follow-up
Sure.
discussion. I guess since we're in the status report mode here, do we have relevant confidence that we can get this real estate transaction closed before the end of September and get construction going before the end of the year? I mean, a lot of the work is internal. Obviously, nobody puts a roof on in the dead of winter unless it's an emergency, but other things that need to happen there aesthetically. Do we have confidence that we can finally move it along and so people can see something happening there by year end?
Well, when will the street work and the staging area be cleared?
I don't know that answer on the street work, but, the project is ongoing. We expect it to wrap up in the fall.
Project is to be done by Halloween.
Yeah, so,
The street project is to be done, all street projects should be done by then.
Yes, that should be, done and gone, and the staging area cleared and all that, prior to, work beginning, I would imagine. So, Ms. Ryan, yes.
Oh, please.
Hi. Deb Ryan, 702 Elm Street, part of the Westies neighborhood. We invited you, and I'm the person that invited you to our neighborhood meeting. I guess since I have recently gone through some refinancing, and I have a master's in business and have been working in accounting and financial area, it just seems to me you're leaving the taxpayers out. We are your stockholders. We are asking, where's his 3 years of tax returns? Where's his audit reports? Whether Chris doesn't want to ask for it, he knows better, he should be asking for it. And even for the first mortgage, what is his income? He's running a food truck. This is an empty building. It's not the same as if you're redoing a business front for a going concern or a business that's been established and may grow 400% if he gets that out of his
Okay,
food truck.
all right,
I have a
thank you.
right to say my time. I understand, but it's my right to make those comments. And as the taxpayers and the concerns that have been voiced by taxpayers online, you don't know what's going on. And then how many of these others have defaulted? You're asking for this much.
Ms. Ryan, I'm asking
And
you to give
Mr.
us a
France
question
blew the
or
whole
to
thing.
wrap it up, okay?
So you're not doing your homework. And in my opinion, you are being negligent.
Thank you, thank you. You can take your seat now. Obviously, Mr. Schultz is partaking of a program that has a long history with the city, and due diligence is being undertaken by both us and the primary lender. So, any other questions from the committee? Anything for Mr.
Schultz,
Shaw?
like,
No, I guess it's very important to note the history of the commercial rehab program and the extremely low loan return rate. I know of almost no loan returns in the history of the program. Again, because the primary lender is, obviously very sensitive, involved in the project as well. But, again, the goal of the city is to, especially in this tool, to focus on the repositioning of blighted properties or properties that need renovation. And so, even small businesses do start and they do fail. We have other lending tools that we use for small businesses. Those are collateralized against, whether that's collateralized against equipment, against some kind of, security that's provided by the small business owner or other entity. This is collateralized against the property and the physical improvements being made to the property by the contractor. Our loan, is only dispersed when the work is being done and it's being recorded against the property. And so we've done this now a handful of times, obviously just most recently in the renovation of Terradera's renovation of the former Books and Banter location, the renovation of the historic depot into the Timekeeper Distillery, the renovation of the Mason's Lodge into the Whitewater Music Hall. We have another application, actually the second time around application on this month's agenda. So we're confident in this program. We're very proud of its success and of its ability to assist, to assist the renovation of blighted properties, which is its goal. The program is also not unique to Wausau. There's obviously many communities that have a program that's well suited towards this, and the review is essentially similar. Again, it's based on the work that's being tangibly done on the property and the loan being taken against that property.
Ms. Rasmussen?
Thank you. So I think to sum up, and I think where I was going with the commercial rehab versus TID is that often in a TID calculation, you're looking at your return on investment and the timeline it takes to recover that investment or exceed it. And I think that what Mr. Schock was trying to say is that in the purpose, using the commercial rehab funding mechanism to rehabilitate property that's essentially blighted or challenged, at the end of the day, regardless of the success of the business that inhabits it ever, you're left with a better building than you began with, whether it continues with that mission or needs to be repurposed at some point or whatever. At some point, a building that had challenges or needed TLC or whatever has received it, and then therefore is a more attractive property going forward, whether it's for the original occupancy or some future one.
And it's a loan, not a grant, so, it
Correct.
does have interest, it's an interest-bearing loan, which which obviously the borrower is paying,
Right.
so.
And so some of those projects that we've done these commercial rehab loans on in other parts of the city have gone on to become other things. They have different occupancies than they had when the loan was taken out. And then some of them have the same occupancy, but, it's a long-term occupancy that existed before and continues to exist today. And I have no reason to doubt that that would be the case with Urban Street Bistro, but the idea that you would emerge with a better building than you began with is the core driving force behind the commercial rehab program. It's not necessarily the core driving force behind TID financing. TID financing is a gap mechanism to create improvement in jobs. And so our, I think, vetting process and our screening of what the return is on our investment and how long it takes to come out ahead on that is certainly much more stringent on TID financing. And I think that's where I was going with the difference between the two, because I think there's been a lack of clarity as far as what funding mechanism the city is using to partner on this project. And so with this being a commercial rehab, we need to fix our focus on the fact that that's what this application is for versus a lot of other things that we've considered here.
Thank you. In the interest of time management, I'm about to close a discussion on this item. I see one hand up in the audience. I will welcome you forward with a question, and I would like to keep it brief so we can move on with our agenda. Thank you.
Sure, no, just a couple questions, and I'm not sure if they're for the committee or for you, sir. Could I ask, do we know who's the first position lender? Has that been, we do?
It likely will be Abbey Bank.
Oh, okay, all right. So they have business plan and all that sort of thing?
And they have the tax returns, they've done their due diligence. with the
Okay,
project, so.
thank you. And actually, I think that was my main question. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Sir, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just wondered if Mr. Schultz had anything else he wanted to add before we wrap this up.
No, I'm content, thank you. I
Very
appreciate
good.
it.
Appreciate your patience in joining us tonight,
No
too.
problem.
I would like to move on to the next item. We are breezing past number 3, correct?
Yeah, we can table number 3 if
All
you're
right.
amenable.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you now. Number 4, discussion and possible action on the updated project completion timeline for the Wausau Chemical Development in the Business Campus and at 2001 North River Drive, 2001 North 2nd Street, 200 Park Avenue, 1940 North 2nd Street, and 180 East Wausau Avenue. Mr. Schock, please.
Yeah, great. So tonight we welcome Rob Flashinsky from Wausau Chemical to provide an update. The development agreement, contemplated a series of what was called multi-party land transfers to occur shortly on the existing 5 parcels associated with Wausau Chemical, with AJR Properties. As you know, we approved earlier this year 2 properties to be transferred to Bridge Community Clinic as part of their expansion. We planned 2 parcels of the 5 for shared parking lots, which would serve Bridge Community, Thrive, and Athletic Park, and we've kind of discussed that previously. I think everyone knows about that. And the main parcel on River Drive would be available for redevelopment, in theory, through a public RFP process that we would have, of course, in the usual process. So we know that they're going to begin an operational move shortly. We expect that to be a many weeks to months process as they begin that in the coming weeks. Hopefully, by October, they'll be starting to move operations. The new building is substantially complete, or is approaching substantially complete, out in the business campus, if anyone's seen it, at the corner of Highland and Innovation. And so we're kind of setting a deadline or a timeline for the transfer of all the properties to the city, which would then allow us, of course, to plan for the RFP timeline as well. So I'd like to welcome Rob if he'd like to add any more information or color to the update memo that was in the packet.
Good evening, Mr. Flashinsky. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, the project has come along. It's really grown out of the ground over the last couple of months. As with most of these construction-type projects, you run into difficulties and delays. We initially started off at the wrong elevation on the site, and it really kind of got compounded and amplified through the winter, which was a very difficult winter this year for building in terms of. So right now, the building is at a point where it's basically shelled in. The main structural elements are done, and now we start the process of getting the new process equipment in and getting that going. And that's really the real challenge. That's the struggle on this project. It's much more so than getting the shell in place. So we are, to Chris's point, we are actively engaged in freeing up one of the facilities. which I think, at the end of the month, we'll be able to turn over to the city for the Bridge Community Project, and then, get focused and get done by the end of the year, move into the, to the main facility that is being built. So with that said, I don't know if there's any questions or any.
What's before the committee, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, so I guess we'd just like to set that deadline of December 31st as, kind of amend the development agreement to reflect that deadline so that we, can effectively plan for everything. So that's if you're okay with that, we'd like to do that.
Ms. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I guess I have just one question, and it's for Mr. Flashinsky. We've traveled a long road to get the project done, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition and have that facility come together for you and have that move finally successfully happen. Do you have any concerns with the December 31st date, or do you believe you're on track substantially enough that by year end you could be wrapped up and moving to the extent that we could transfer those properties reasonably on that date?
I'm not going to pretend with bravado that I don't have concerns around the project and the timing. Very difficult environment in terms of getting resources lined up and costs associated with that. But I believe we can manage that. We're going to scope things such that we'll push some things forward just for the sake of the timeline so that we can get into the building and get operational and then come back and finish portions of that up over time. So yeah, I believe we're going to get there by the end of the year.
Good.
But it's a lot of moving parts, and it's quite an adventure. It's not a simple.
No, it's always a learning experience along the way too, so.
Yes, I mean, there's certainly, we're not in the business of building buildings.
Right.
And, so it's a new experience for us.
And also, the RFP process is not something that's rapid, and, it can be developed in parallel to your activities, and the trigger is pulled at the proper time when there's a confidence level that timing is right. So there's no reason for us to sit and wait so much as kind of prepare as we go along and then be ready. Anything else from the committee? Mr. Gisselman?
Just, Chris, with regard to your August 6th memo, the two parcels to include future shared lots for Bridge Community, Thrive, and Athletic Park, will those remain with the city then, or are those potentially some, or don't we know yet?
Yeah, good que-
Initially, so as of December 31st, they'll become part of the city. I know that there may have been some other, and those two parcels are that.
Sorry, do you
Can
mean
you-
where they are?
Yeah,
Or-
right,
Yeah,
just,
so the
for
the two parcels that are going to remain with the city are likely the north side of Wausau Avenue, right at the intersection of Second, right? And we've discussed that would be a shared lot potentially for the Bridge Community Project and for Athletic Park. And then the lot that's often referred to as the Thrive lot, which is actually not owned by Thrive, but, the kind of parcel just south of Thrive, because we want to ensure they have ample parking as well. So both of those parcels are owned by Wausau Chemical, by AGR Properties, and they would remain owned by the city. The parcel south of what's often referred to as the Woodworkers Mart at 2102 East 2nd Street is also owned by AGR. That would be transferred to Bridge Community as part of their project. And the other parcel, the warehouse at the corner of, at the next corner on Second, the kind of large warehouse building would also be transferred to Bridge Community, and they had, that will be part of their project.
Across the street then from the woodware.
Yes,
Right.
across the street, yeah.
On
What
the
is the
east side-
historic name of
East side
that?
of Second Street.
What's the historic name of that one? It was a
Well, I referred, the
printing-
Marathon Press building.
Marathon Press, exactly.
Right,
So the
okay.
part of the Marathon Press property would be transferred to Bridge Community as part of their project. If you remember from the map of the proposal that we accepted for Bridge Community, they had community gardens on the Marathon Press building parcel, and they had part of their building expansion and community gardens and a community room or market space at the at the property south of the Woodworkers Mart and the Woodworkers Mart building, which is owned by the CDA.
Right,
Yep,
thank you.
great.
I think it's always great when discussion in committees or council turns to something regarding history, and all heads turn to Mr. Gisselman
They
for
always.
sage advice and his archives in his brain. Anything else from the committee?
I have just a quick comment.
Okay.
Given the fact that our project that we have in progress with Wausau Chemical was a partnership between them and the city, it always has been for the mutual success of both, I think it makes sense that we would be able to work together to also set this date for 12/31. And, if we need to work our RFP process in parallel with Wausau Chemical's relocation as they step into their new building in phases, I think that certainly makes sense. So I'll make a motion then to
Thank you.
approve the addition of the 12/31 date.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second from Mr. Peckham. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None are opposed. Thank you.
you.
Appreciate your coming. All right, number 5 on the agenda, discussion and possible action on the issuance of an RFP for the North Riverfront area encompassing Great Lakes Cheese and Wausau Chemical. We've just discussed that preliminarily in our previous item. Anything further from the committee on this?
Yeah, well, if you have any questions, we just scoped out. As you know, this is in the North Riverfront Vision area, which we have kind of a rough vision plan for, so we're referencing that. And we're kind of, we're giving, I think, what we think is kind of some ample time, essentially 2 months window for someone to make a proposal. And we've highlighted in the evaluation criteria we've reiterated the city's incentive and development strategy elements, which come from the TIF application, which was recently updated, obviously. We included examples from the North Riverfront site, or North Riverfront Vision Plan there. And then, of course, the 2 properties, Wausau Chemical's main site, which is there, and the Great Lakes Cheese Lemke Cheese Packaging properties, which we do own at this point. Obviously, we have taken title of those properties, and demolition has begun at the Great Lakes Cheese property. So we expect demolition to wrap up about the end of the year. And given the timeline that we know Wausau Chemical would be moving out of the main property about the end of the year, we think it's a good time to release the RFP and receive proposals, and then obviously we can schedule those proposals to jive with the timelines of the demo and the relocation.
So is it safe to say that the RFP verbiage at this point is not in draft form, but is in final form?
If you like it, yes.
Committee, Ms. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I have a question about just that. As I was reading this over, the RFP language is actually pretty vague and it's very standard, but, I think by some measure, we want to be a little bit vague to allow people to be creative with what they propose for their use of the space. But that said, I think that knowing that we are repurposing a site previously, one of the sites previously housed by Wausau Chemical, I think a number of potential developers will have questions about the site, about the current environmental status of the site. And I think question number 1 from all of them is going to be, what does that picture look like? And, what, if anything, do they have to be concerned about there? And I know that we have testing results from that. We've got some Phase 1 data. I think that something about that needs to be included in the narrative in reference to that property. The Great Lakes Cheese property is a little bit cleaner proposition because that was a different land use. But I think that when we just put this out there and we say, developers, give us your vision to repurpose that site, given what's on it today, I think people may be gun shy to just come forward and make a proposal, not knowing, what that site is. And, I've already run into, a couple folks in town that may someday be interested in this parcel, saying, well, is it polluted or not? And what's, what does the city know about the property? And, we know that we've pre-screened it a little bit, and I think there needs to be some more language in there about, what we know about that property already,
Not only
as far
that,
as
but,
hazards.
it takes time to develop the response to an RFP, with a lot of detail, and it'd surely be a waste of time perhaps for somebody that was looking at, let's say, underground parking at the Wausau Chemical site, or that weren't aware that that might be a problem for them.
How about on page 3, we do say more information on the site is available, but how about we reference directly, including environmental testing results and any restrictions therein, and we can provide that information to anyone who's interested. Because we do, as you noted, we have a very intimate knowledge of that site because we have done extensive testing, and the Conestoga Rover folks were here
Right.
years ago presenting that. So
We do, I think that's the minimum we should put in, but I also think that we should talk a little bit about, the history of that area. I think that, we know that other sites that we've developed on the riverfront have needed some remediation. Some of that the city has undertaken before it even offered up the land, and some of those sites to the south, but, in some cases, some of the reports indicated that vapor barrier might be necessary for certain soils. I think that it's important to tell people that we know that, and not only that we know it, but in many cases, through public-private partnership, there's been help with stuff like that in the past on prior projects. And so, potential developers may not recognize that there's a potential for a partnership, or, that we're not only aware of, what challenges a site like that might present, but there are some solutions that have already been carried out on other parcels similarly situated. And I think it helps to build some of that into your narrative so that people that ordinarily might be afraid of a site like that aren't. And I think that may increase the number of bids.
So we can add that to that section then, if you like.
Please do.
Are you making a motion to see revised verbiage?
Yes, I would like us to direct staff to elaborate a little bit on the Wausau Chem site as part of this, and then, bring us another specimen of that detail. I think if we entertain it at our September meeting, which is just a couple weeks away, it's not that much of a delay anyway in the process. I don't think that, waiting an extra 3 weeks to release the RFP is going to really upset the process too much. I'd like to
Okay.
see a little more.
Do I have a second from the committee? I think Mr. Gisselman had his hand up. I saw a hand in the audience. Mr. Killian, you'd like to come forward, please? Again, in the interest of time, I'd like to keep public discussion on the items brief and to the point.
Absolutely. I just have a few questions. Thank you. Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street. And these questions relate to Wausau Chemical. And my first question would be about the RFP, and if that, kind of speaking to Ms. Rasmussen's points, will that be inclusive then of residential development, or is this perhaps geared toward something else? And in terms of the status of the Superfund site, is the city still a PRP in that Superfund? And also, the DNR had rescinded, I believe, a responsible party letter in 2016 to Wausau Chemical after this, the effort initially had failed to pass a vote, I believe, with the city. And moving forward, if this does go into residential development, who will really be saddling the full investigation and any possible remediation and liability there? And I'm sorry, there's just one more, and not for tonight necessarily, but in general, I believe it's important. It had come to our attention with the state, the Department of Health Services, that a follow-up cancer study was going to be done in regard to the city's former dump and Wausau Chemical. It's cited in 2001 that it would do that study, and when an open records request was done, it was unable to provide that follow-up study. So at the convenience of the city, if it could check with the state to see if that study was ever done, I believe it would be useful to the community. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
I can answer. So just answering your questions on, yes, the RFP will be open to uses, so it doesn't specify whether they would be residential in nature or not. Obviously, we will provide, the information, especially the extensive testing that was done as part of Phase 2 analysis at the existing Wausau Chemical site, to any potential developer, they'll want to know that, obviously, and they'll want to, understand what the delta would be to bring that property to residential standards if they're going to propose residential standards at that site. But it's premature because we're not sure. Perhaps there won't be a residential proposal for that site, and so then determining who would be responsible or how much total of the responsibility of remediation would be is hard to determine yet. We do know, as you recall from our lengthy discussions earlier, that the extensive testing had, an estimate, from Conestoga Rover about $200,000, I believe, to, kind of remediate it to certain levels. If that was part of then that could, of course, be part of a negotiation on a potential project. But it may not be, if it's not residential use, that would be a lower threshold on remediation. The city, I believe, is still a party, obviously, to the Wausau Energy, Superfund site in that area, and we're still, that will continue ongoing.
I mean, obviously, the city has identified this area as a prime development opportunity, and will follow every due diligence step required to make sure that what happens there is something that works. Mr. Peckham?
Yes, thank you. Considering the magnitude of the potential investment that we would be talking about here, I think we should put these out and have a longer period of time to return them. 7 weeks doesn't seem like enough. I think we should, we don't have to decide this today, but I would think we'd want to give people 12 weeks, because this is a big deal. So.
That's fair,
Something
because,
to consider.
it seems that there could be some back and forth, asking for extra information so somebody can fine tune their response, so. Mr. Gisselman?
In addition to, could this committee, as well as perhaps the city council, I think as we move forward with this project, I think we need to know what those environmental reports has said about this property.
You have all of that, you've had all that information I don't have it immediately, but,
Well, it goes back, can we be refreshed on phase 2 then? And
we can talk to environmental engineering
The
about
committee,
that.
the
Yeah.
committee did get that, and that's where we got the issue with the residential versus commercial use and, the need for vapor barrier if that use was habitational. But there was a report that we got, but I think it was quite large in volume, and I think we summarized that in the committee here like maybe 2 years ago, when we first started to negotiate with Wausau Chem, because we weren't sure we wanted that building in the first place. I think that's when that study got done, right?
Yeah, just let us know. We can get you whatever you want.
Really was part of our decision-making process
Right.
at the time,
Right.
so. Anything further?
So I'll make a note, potential release September 3rd at our next meeting, and we'll refine the language, and we'll give, we'll give about 3 months' time or so. Let's see, I would say, I think it might be wise to get it done, in December, before you get into holidays and delay things further. So, but we'll come up with a timeline for draft in the next draft.
Ms. Ryan, I welcome you to come forward with a brief question.
Deb Ryan, 702 Elm Street. For the RFP, since the disaster of the France projects, do you have an independent review panel that does not include staff or alderpersons that reviews the RFPs independently? That is something that I have worked with
No,
and
we don't.
have
Thank you.
seen, and
Appreciate the
getting
question.
something so that the residents who are the shareholders are getting a fair and an impartial review.
There will not be an independent review. Thank you. Anything else from the committee? Mr. Peckham?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to note that I liked Lisa's suggestions. You kind of touched on, in terms of added verbiage, she referred to that we've been down this road before in terms of cleanup and some contaminated property, and I think perhaps some language could be included that the city would be glad to share the success story that we've had with putting to good commercial use the property immediately to the south of Bridge Street. And, we've done this, and
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not concerned about that. Okay,
So-
great.
Very good. We've had a motion and a second and discussion. Any further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. All right. Discussion and possible action on the sale of business campus property on Innovation Way to Composite Envisions.
Great. So, so tonight we welcome Corey Thorson from Composite Envisions. As you know, as we had discussed before and had agendized, this, we are just in the early discussions with Composite Envisions for their expansion, potentially in the West Business Campus. They have looked at a parcel adjacent to Great Lakes Cheese in our expansion area. I'll let you talk about your vision, Corey.
All right. Right now, with the help from our previous agreement, we've been able to move into a new facility. Basically, right now we're running out of space. We have about 9,600 square foot facility, and we need. We're leasing some place by part of some cold storage by Sunnyvale, dropping some containers in the back, and we just need to do something. We just built this building we started building it 4 years ago, and we kind of outgrew it pretty quick. We had enough land where we could expand on it, but our expansion plans, we're looking for a building about triple the size, so it would kind of limit us. If we expanded where we're at, it's going to kind of limit us to, future expansion on that site. So I think before we really get down with some really heavy machinery and get everything wired in properly and set up even to be more efficient, that it's better to start at a new site that will let us grow. Since last time since our last agreement, we nearly doubled our job growth goals that we had, and we have a staff of 13 with us, and we are bringing in some jobs from out of town, which is important. Like, we brought in a composite engineer from out of town. He came here, bought a house, and was, so I think that's kind of the ultimate goal of all this kind of stuff. And what we want to do is, we just need physically more space, so we can hire more people and continue to grow and keep what we have going on the right track.
Well, congratulations on, the continued growth of your business. We will be going into closed session shortly to discuss this. But before we do, does anybody from committee have a question?
I have a question, actually. With regard to expansion, do you have any forecast as far as what you'd be adding for job numbers for workforce?
Within about 2 years, we expect to it's going to be about double, so approximately 10 people.
Okay.
10 more people? is it
Yeah,
you said?
within a couple of years. So we're not gonna try to stop. So this is just what I could say now.
Do we have a guess also within those 10, what they'd be looking at in terms of salary on average per year? Just gross?
It's gonna vary. There's gonna be, some higher end administration jobs.
Okay.
We're getting to the point where it's not just, your standard general labor jobs. We need specialty people and specialty positions to really grow this to where we need it to grow.
Okay. Anything else from the committee for Corey? All right, thank you. Yes, as I said, we will be going to close shortly to talk about it. so.
Okay, thanks.
Before I take a motion to go into closed on this item, I'd like to skip number 10, the addendum for this evening, discussion and possible action on the commercial rehabilitation application received for the property at 324 Scott Street. Fill us in, please, Mr. Schock.
Yeah, Tammy will present, I think.
Ms. Strotz, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, the memorandum that I handed out just before the meeting, I have to apologize. I have the wrong address, and thank you, Gary, for pointing that out. It's for the property at 324 Scott Street. Rob Shepard is here if you have some specific questions of him. He has approached us and is asking for $15,000 towards the renovation of, the exterior renovations of his building. If you notice the condition of it, he's had some issues with the exterior falling off of his property. So he's been investigating for several months, trying to figure out what was the cause of that and what does he need to do to remediate and get it back to where it's secured. He's working with a local lender for the additional funds, and you'll see the sources and uses there. Again, he's just requesting $15,000 of us. The majority of it's coming from his local lender, and the mural will be redone.
I have a quick,
Thank you,
I
Tammy.
have a quick
Yes, go ahead.
question. Now, with regard to the Shepherd and Schaller property and the adjacent properties along Scott Street, those properties have utilized commercial rehab funding before, correct?
Correct. Actually, Rob was our poster child. He took care, he was our very first one, and I think he was the model for this
Yep.
program, and paid it off, was successful many years ago, and I think it's a no-brainer, but
Yep, that was my point, just because you can see the transformation in that building and in others, and I think we've used that one before as an example of what a success story with that fund looks like. And so when we were discussing it on the Urban Street Bistro item, that was really the point I was trying to make, is that at the end, you come out with a better building, so.
See, Mr. Shepherd is taken to his feet. Would you like to come forward, or? You're welcome to come forward in case anybody does have a question for you. I appreciate you being here tonight, and I do remember, you know, when that first rehabilitation effort took place, and I saw the kind of the ripple effects, which kind of turned into a tsunami downtown in many ways, so
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It worked well, and here I am again, unfortunately. So, yeah, the scope of the project obviously is what you see on the outside on the east wall. Unfortunately, we're not exactly sure, and Gary is a local historian, so maybe he knows a little background of that building, but that was not an exterior wall ever meant to be. It was butted up, I believe, the Record Herald building.
That's correct.
And then when they tore that building down, I think they were trying to come up with some means of securing or solidifying that wall, which was a concrete schmear, if you will. So obviously, time went on, and some things are just letting loose, and we can't really do any brick rehab because it's not meant to be exterior brick. I'm told it's Ringo brick, which is not good exterior brick. And so we're coming up with an EFIS product, which is going to look just like it is now, but it's going to have a water membrane which will flush the water down, and you know, and it also have insulating componentry to it, and it should help the building. I've had many experts for the last umpteen months checking the building, the sustainability of the building, the sturdiness of it, and they all tell me it's built like the Rock of Gibraltar, other than what happened on that exterior wall. So that's a part of it, and then we're also going to be doing some Scott Street things, rehabbing our rehab, if you will. Because that is, after 20 years of road salt on Scott Street, is showing a little wear and tear as well. So that is also in the scope of the project.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from our local hysterical tour director,
Second.
and a second. Further discussion?
Can we
Seeing
just
none.
have, for the record, what the interest rate would be on this?
it's 1.5%.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And none are. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thanks for
time. I
coming down.
appreciate it.
You bet. Now I would entertain a motion to go into closed session for the item.
Somebody want to read it? I will.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pat.
I'll do it. Move to go into closed session pursuant to 19.851E of Wisconsin statutes for deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Topic to be discussion and possible action on the sale of business campus property on Innovation Way to Composite Envisions.
Thank you very much. We'll take roll call vote. Rasmussen?
We need a second first.
Right,
Sorry.
second, I'm sorry, second on that?
I'll second it.
Mr. Martins. Okay, now, Rasmussen?
Aye.
Peckham?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
Gisselman? And I say aye. Thank you. We are going into closed.